Hey there guys, I'm so glad you're here. So, if you're meeting me for the first time, my name is Cheyenne. I am a costumer, seamstress, crafty nerd person, and I'm very in favor of punching Nazis. Of course I say this, look at me. I'm soft as hell. I'm not gonna fight anybody. I haven't thrown a punch since middle school, maybe. But I do think that it is an important thing to make your stance clear on these days, for reasons. But anyway, so I've been thinking a lot about punching Nazis lately. And in particular, it kind of was making me think about my personal favorite Nazi puncher. And that, of course, is Wonder Woman. Now, I love Wonder Woman. I've loved Wonder Woman for a long, long time. I've cosplayed Wonder Woman in the past. I've done her like 30s Wonder Woman before, specifically because I am obsessed with early Wonder Woman. I am obsessed with Nazi punching, S&M dom, radical feminist Wonder Woman from the 30s. If you have never read OG Wonder Woman comics, do yourself a favor. They are incredible. They're so wild. And that version was very retro, very pin-up. I think it was very palatable to a lot of people. And I love that version, but it kind of feels like it's time. I really want to make another Wonder Woman. And a Wonder Woman look that I have always loved and that I've been thinking about for a while is Darwyn Cooke's version of the character from Justice League: The New Frontier. Now, Wonder Woman doesn't actually get a ton of page time in The New Frontier, but just from the bits that she gets, like, Darwyn Cooke gets it. He gets Wonder Woman. The scene where she, like the main scene that she has in it, she has freed a bunch of women who were being used by the rebels in the Korean War, and she literally is like, I opened the gates, I let them do what they wanted, and I'm not sorry, because like, screw those men, and honestly, like, America doesn't want me to do this, I don't care. What are you gonna do about it? And it's so incredible. And I love her in that, and I love the way Darwyn Cooke draws her. Honestly, Darwyn Cooke is one of my favorite artists. I also am obsessed with his Catwoman run. I really, really want to do his version of Catwoman someday as well. But I love the way that he draws Diana. He draws her really like strong and sturdy and solid and taller than Superman, which I love. I love when Wonder Woman is the tallest out of the big three. It's one of my favorite things. I was actually reading recently that apparently he got some pushback from DC on his design for Wonder Woman because they thought she looked quote unquote fat, which... But I love Darwyn Cooke's Wonder Woman because she feels so strong and so powerful. And I'm kind of in a place right now where I feel like I need to feel strong and powerful right now. I don't super feel that right now. And so I thought maybe making a Wonder Woman would be a really good way to kind of give myself that feeling, because I need it right now. And on top of it feeling kind of emotionally like the right time for me to do another Wonder Woman, I was going through all of the fabrics that I had hanging around, and I realized that I have almost everything. I have basically every piece of fabric to do a Wonder Woman, and specifically to do Darwyn Cooke's Wonder Woman. So it was like, well, it's the fates, the stars have aligned, I have to do it. So let's talk about the plans. So I have 2 rolls of this red faux leather. I'm not 100% sure where I got this from. I think maybe my mother might have given it to me. My mother's also a seamstress, and she and my father moved from Las Vegas to outside of Atlanta a couple years back, and I got a lot of her fabric because she didn't want to bring it all with her. And I assume that's where I got this from, but I'm not 1000% sure about that. But I really love this. It's like a red, but it's not like fire engine red, which feels kind of appropriate for Darwyn Cooke Wonder Woman in particular, to have something that's like kind of rich and almost sepia-ish. Do you know what I mean? And I have 2 rolls of this. I think I should have more than enough. Like, honestly, I would be shocked if I need to use both of these. Next up, I have some of this blue fabric. If I remember right, this is a Yaya Han cosplay fabric. I don't remember what this is from either. There's like, it's been cut into, so I clearly bought it for something and used a piece of it, but didn't use all of it. But I think this will be great for the little tabs, right? I have a piece of this silver leather. I've had this leather for years. If I'm remembering right, I believe I might have bought this to make part of my BB-8 costume, which is a costume I made well over 10 years ago. But I've always held on to this because it's like a silver leather is something that I know I'll use in like superhero costumes and stuff like that. So I've held on to it for years. And I think this will be perfect for the silver parts of Wonder Woman. I really want it to feel leathery in the way that like Roman and Grecian armor was largely made out of leather. Do you know what I mean? And then the only thing that I had to buy is I bought a roll of this gold faux leather. There's not a ton of it, but honestly, for the bits that I need to do for this costume, I think this should be more than enough. So fabric wise, I have everything that I need, and I really, really like these colors together. I think this is going to really give classic, mythical, iconic Wonder Woman. And then in terms of patterning, Darwyn Cooke's Wonder Woman design is kind of unique in the way that it does the eagle, which I really, really like. It does, basically it turns the entire cups of her corset into the wings, and then there's like an eagle piece in the middle, which I think looks really cool. And it's also a design I feel like I haven't really seen anybody cosplay. And I have kind of an idea of what I want to do for the bodice. I think we're going to be using a pattern for a different DC character, but like you'll see it. Trust me on the vision. So this is the Bombshell Supergirl pattern. I actually used the bodice for this for a different Wonder Woman. I used the bodice for this when I did Amazon years ago. But it is like a cupped bodice, and it has a separate piece at the top. So I think that this is pretty perfect for what I want to do. Like if I just take this and I add the stitching line to the cups to represent the feathers and the eagle, I think that I can really make it look like that. And then it's just a simple boned bodice. I might not be boning the bodice because I think the way that I'm going to do the rest of it is we're going to be doing a waist waspy for the belt. I have a waspy pattern that I've used for many costumes now by Caroline's Corsets on Etsy, if I'm remembering correctly. And I've used it for Elvira. I've used it for Pearl. I've used it for many, many characters. It's like a pattern I know I can do really easily, and then I know really flatters my body. So we're going to do that out of the gold leather. And then I think that the skirt tabs are going to be attached to that. So I don't have any kind of pattern that kind of looks like those tabs, and I haven't found anything that's like going to be super useful. So I think I'm just going to have to pattern the tabs. That's not a huge deal. And I'll just make briefs for underneath, right? Like I think that's the perfect way to go with that. I can use that silver to make the wristbands. I would like to try to make the winged crown that he does for Wonder Woman. I'm not 1000% sure how I'm going to put that together, but I figure I can get to that way later in this. I have a black wig that I can use and restyle. I found boots that I like that I will order when I get paid again. And I figure I'll just pattern the leg guards once I get the boots. But for the most part, nothing on it is crazy complicated, but it's very striking. So I think if I can pull it off and do it right, it's gonna look really, really cool. So that's the plan. I think today we're gonna work on our patterning. So I am going to just cut out a mock-up of the corset and then try to kind of figure out what size I want those tabs to be. And maybe we'll cut the bodice out as well today, but we're just gonna go over to the table and get started. Let's go. So like I said, we started this project with doing a mock-up of the corset. I'm using the Corsets by Caroline Waspy belt pattern that I've used multiple times. I'm adding seam allowance here because this pattern doesn't come with seam allowance. And then I also made the top of the belt a little bit pointier just so that it would feel a little bit more like Wonder Woman's belt. And I just cut that out of some scrap muslin so that we could get that going. And then it was time for me to figure out the tabs. I took the belt mock-up that I laid out, and I just kind of tried to guesstimate. I knew how long I wanted the front one to be, and then I just kind of roughed out the shapes. I knew they probably weren't actually going to lie flat next to each other like this, but this was the easiest way in my mind that I could get them to kind of all be the lengths that I wanted. And this was just for me to kind of mock this up and figure out if this idea was even going to work. Obviously, I'm going to go in and clean them up later. Next, I cut my paper ones out so that I could make a proper mock-up. I didn't add seam allowance at this point because I just wanted to look at the shapes, but obviously when I get to the point that I'm going to make them for real, we're going to add seam allowance to them. But a lot of the time when I'm just doing mock-up stuff, especially something like this where I just want to see how they hang, it's kind of an unnecessary step at this point, in my opinion. I cut out 2 each out of some scrap cotton. If I had done this again, I think I would have done a different color when I cut this out, just because I think it would have made it easier to look at. In the mock-up, these colors were really close together, but it wasn't a huge deal. Obviously, it worked out in the end. And when you make corsets for real, it's multiple layers. For this mock-up, I just added a couple of boning channels to my muslin that I cut out because the belt is not what we're worrying about, right? I just want to make sure that the tabs are hanging the way that I want them to. And then I just basted all of those along the bottom so that I could take a look at it and kind of see how it was looking. Okay, so this is mock-up number 1. Obviously, it's a little hard to tell the difference between the 2 pieces because they're both kind of white. From the front, I'm really happy with this. Where the tabs are landing, I think works pretty good. But here's the thing. Now, so this will probably be alleviated somewhat when I have proper grommets in this and when I am able to lace it more tightly, because I put grommets in this, but they're already coming out because they're kind of cheap grommets because I didn't want to use my good grommets for a mock-up, right? And I also didn't sew the bones in completely. So they're trying to come up, a bunch of stuff, but my whole butt is out. My whole butt is out. So I think that I need to lengthen the corset and then add a few extra tabs. I'm also thinking about potentially attaching the back few tabs to the briefs so that way, no matter what level of whether I don't tighten it all the way or if I gain a little weight, I will still have coverage back there. Do you know what I mean? So I think we're going to take this, we're going to lengthen this about maybe 1 inch each on each side. And then we're going to make a couple more tabs, I think, because I like how this is cascading up. So I think that we'll add one more that's kind of short like this in here. And then one more long one in the back. And then we'll make a big back tab. And that I think I'll attach to the briefs. That's my thought process. I hope that makes sense. I'm gonna go and work on putting another mock-up together. But the idea is there. The vibes are there. So once I can get this to come together the way that I want, I think it's gonna work really well. And obviously this one isn't perfect, but I'll make my next one out of Catil, and then that can be the underside to the finished one, if that makes sense. All right, let's get back to work. So I added in a few extra tabs. Apparently I forgot to film that part. And then I took all of the tabs that I had and I lettered them so I wouldn't get them mixed up and traced them onto pattern paper so that I could go in and clean those up, right? Because the initial ones that I made, I freehanded. They weren't necessarily symmetrical. They weren't necessarily even. So it was really worth it for me to take the time to make sure that these all looked the way that I wanted. And then I added in the seam allowance at this point as well. I added in a 1/2 inch, just the easiest one for me. And just did that for all of the pieces and cut them all out. And those are going to be our pattern pieces for the final product. And once the patterning was done, it was simply time to cut out all of the tabs in the universe, it felt like. So I started with tabs A through G, so we're talking 7 tabs, and I had to cut them first out of my fashion layer that was going to be on the outside. So that's what you see me doing here. I'm cutting these all out of the Ayahan fabric. I tried to kind of close them in as much as possible because I knew I might need 1 or 2 more. Next, because the Ayahan fabric I'm using is a stretch and I want these to lay pretty flat and be pretty structured, I also cut them out of a interfacing so that I could give them a little extra stiffness. So that's now 14 tabs. But the tabs are just hanging, so we can't leave the undersides white like that. So next I cut the same tabs out of a dark blue lining fabric that I have left over from some project. I don't even remember. And then I decided that I was going to also interface the lining sides. So that's 14 more. So now we are looking at 28 tabs that I had to cut out one by one. Be grateful that I speed this footage up, you guys, because it was not this zippy doing it in real time. That's all I'll say. And then while I was at the cutting table, I also decided I was going to cut out all of the corset pieces. So here you see me tracing my mock-up. Now, do you remember how I was talking about adding a couple of inches to this mock-up? Well, apparently I forgot about that when I was doing this, so it really would have behooved me to have remembered to do that. It wasn't a huge deal for the final product because we worked it out, but like, when you make a note to yourself that you want to change something, try to remember to actually do it. That's all I'll say. I don't know. I also cut 2 layers of coutil for the corset for strength. Sometimes I'll just do 1, but since I knew I wanted this to be pretty strong, I added 2. And then to line it, I had just some yellow cotton lying around, and I felt like that would look a little bit better on the inside than just plain white because it's still kind of in the gold color family. So I cut that out for our lining as well. Then while I was here, I cut the briefs out too. It was just easier to kind of do it all at once. Do you know what I mean? And I'm just using the briefs pattern from the Supergirl pattern because I've made it before. It's really easy. Then it was time to finally start sewing. I started by doing what's called flat lining to the corset pieces, which is basically just when you serge the lining or the structure layer to the fabric you want on the outside. I do this a lot if I have a fabric that I want to use for something for aesthetic reasons, but it's maybe not strong enough, or if it, say, has a stretch and it's not supposed to, or something like that. This is really great for that, just so the pieces stay together and they don't move around, and it just gives it that extra strength. Then I added my boning channels to the corset. This is a corset that in the past I've made without boning channels, but when I've had the bottom of the front kind of flip up, so it is worth it to put those couple of bones in there for strength. Then it was just time to attach the inner and outer parts of the corset. I did them at the top and then turned them because I knew I was going to sandwich my tabs in. So I didn't, normally you would sew both sides together and pull it through. In this case, we're not doing that because we want to attach the tabs on the inside of the bottom, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. Next, it was time to start on the tabs. Now, you can't always do this with like a pleathery fabric, but I did a test piece with this Yaya Han fabric, and it can take enough heat that I was able to iron this fusible interfacing on. It just made my life so much easier. But again, if you're ever going to try something like this, do a test piece with scrap so you don't ruin your main. And then I went in and serged all those pieces, so they're kind of being flatlined anyway, but it just keeps it a little bit cleaner, a little bit smoother to do both steps, in my opinion. I also serged the lining pieces, honestly just because this lining is a little bit shreddy. It's pretty cheap. Again, I don't even remember what I got it for, but it was probably something I bought really cheap in the fashion district in LA, and it was just easier to flatline it and not worry about it. Then I decided I should do the stars at this point because I decided I only wanted them to be sewn to the front layer. I didn't want to have the stitching for them showing up on the lining. So I just cut out a little star shape and cut out a ton of them. And I still ended up having to cut out more of these, but I just cut them out of the silver leather. I decided that would look nice. Sometimes Wonder Woman stars are white instead of silver, but I feel like this ended up looking exactly the way that I wanted in the end. So that's all that really matters. Then I sewed each star on each individual tab. I used my zipper foot so that I could get really, really close to that edge. I used the dark blue that I was using to put the tabs together because I didn't have any gray. And I thought it would be a nice contrast, but honestly, looking back, I think that I really would have preferred to have done this with a gray or silver thread. Not the biggest deal in the world, just something that's going to irk me personally until the end of time, probably. Then from there, it was time to sew the fronts and linings of each of the tabs together. Obviously, you only see me doing one, but just know this took a bajillion years because there were so many to do. And then before I turned them inside out, I clipped my points just so I could get them nice and strong. and turned all of them out. This is another situation where I really need to get a new point turner. I'm so used to having long nails to do it, and I'm not wearing my nails super long all the time anymore, that it was just so frustrating trying to get these to come out exactly the way that I wanted them to. And then I also went ahead and top stitched all of the tabs as well, just to help them lay nice and flat. You know, you really want these to be like flat and structured to get the look that you want. Then once all the tabs were done, I sandwiched them in between the outer and inner layers of the corset and top stitched the whole thing down. Now this was rough because I was sewing through effectively like 6 layers of pretty heavy fabrics. So I had to really take my time with this. I definitely broke a couple needles, but it wasn't the end of the world. Then I also put the briefs together at this point. Really simple. I just sewed the sides up. I did casings for the leg openings because this isn't something that's super complicated. They're literally just going to go under the skirt, so I didn't need them to be the fanciest things I'd ever made in the world. Then I was able to baste in my last couple of tabs, and I added some big long elastic to the top of them. A blue would have been nicer because then I wouldn't have had to worry about it peeking out. But this is what I had on hand, and it's really just so they don't come disconnected from the bodice. And then it was time to start on the bodice. So I started by just tracing my pieces onto the leather. It's just easier because then you don't have to worry about a ton of pin pricks in your pieces once they're done. I will say this is one of those times I don't really have a set of pattern weights. I didn't grow up using them. I grew up in a house where we learned to sew using pins basically only. And I really would like to get a set at some point because they seem like they'd be handy for stuff like this. But I don't know. I don't even know what kind to get. Does anybody have any recommendations on what kind of pattern weights you recommend? Maybe I'll make some. Maybe I'll see if I can make some that are like really cutesy or like Barbie themed. Ooh, let me work on that as a concept. Stay tuned on that. But I just cut everything out. I did this basically exactly like the pattern called for because I've used this pattern before. I know that it fits me the way that I want. I know that it's going to work out the way that I want. So I just kind of threw this together pretty quickly. And then at that point, it was just time to start sewing everything together. I started by sewing the red bustier pieces together. Really simple. Just follow the lines. Nothing super exciting there. This is a reminder to make sure that you clip your seams, especially for something like a leather that you can't press. Next, it was time to put the bra cups together. So I started just putting them together, just like the pattern said to. And again, just made sure to really clip these edges because this is a really big round shape. And this is a pleather that doesn't want to, smoothly curve. Okay, I don't even know if I'm going to use this footage in the video, but I just have to take a moment. So this is one of the bra cups for this bustier. And it's one of those things I genuinely forget sometimes how big my boobs actually are. Like, this is a hat. I'm just carrying 2 of these around all the time. No wonder my shoulders always hurt. This is insanity. But like, that's right. Like, that's the correct size. God, being a woman is weird sometimes. Then once the cups were sewn, it was time for me to add the top stitching to give them that eagle wing look. I just did straight stitch top stitching on this. Looking back, I kind of wish that I had done something a little bit more impactful from far away. Like maybe if I had done like a thin zigzag or something, I think that would have been a little bit more impactful, but I did what I did. It's not the end of the world. And then following the pattern, I put this little top piece together. You just had to turn it under and then attach it. Once I attached this, it really did start looking like the wings that I was hoping it would look like. So I started to get really excited at this point because it was like, oh my God, I was right. It's working. I love when that happens. It doesn't always, but it did here. Then the pattern called for piping to be used to attach the cups to the bustier, and I didn't have any gold piping, so we're going to make some. I have this mint piping that I bought a whole thing of for like $1 in the fashion district probably like 8 years ago, and I still have so much of it. I just took a scrap piece of some gold Yaya Han fabric and took my zipper foot and just sandwiched it in and sewed it along and clipped it. And then we had some gold piping that was absolutely perfect for what we needed to do with it. Then it was time for the piping to be attached. I attached the piping with my zipper foot to the right side of the bra cups, basically so that when it gets turned under, you'll just see the piping, if that makes sense. You can see it. Hopefully that makes sense as you're watching it. And then the pattern called for me to turn the piping under here. That's not always the way that I would do this, but I decided the pattern is working the way that I wanted to, so I'm just going to follow it. So I turned the piping under at this point, so we just have that nice finished edge. And then that just needed to be attached to the bodice at the top and the bottom. I also at this point decided to add on a gold sliver that would kind of represent where the body of the eagle was going to be, because I wasn't 100% sure how I was going to attach the head of the eagle at that point. So I figured I would just make sure that there was a good kind of base for where that needed to go. And then initially I wasn't sure if I was going to line the bodice. I do not always line cosplay because it's not always super necessary, but I decided since this was all going to be a PVC and it was probably going to be pretty sweaty, and also because I might want to add a couple of bones, that I was going to put a lining together. Initially, I wasn't planning to put any bones in the bustier because I was planning to have a boned corset for the belt, but I thought about it and I didn't want to be stressed out about it falling down, right? Because it's a strapless bustier. So I added some bones just to the sides, the back, and then I added one each to the breast seams just to make sure that I didn't have to stress out about it falling down. We are using my favorite thing for a real basic situation like this, which is cable ties. They are insanely inexpensive. They're pretty strong. And for something that I'm not planning to tight lace with, they work perfectly well. Then it was just a matter of attaching the lining and the outer bustier right sides together and then turning them out. I did also top stitch them once again, just to make sure that everything laid nice and flat and clean. And then apparently I forgot to film it, but I also added a separating zipper at this point. Then we could finally try it on. So this is the very first try on. I love the colors together. I love the way the skirt is looking. I will say I can only get it so tight by myself, and there's a bigger gap in the back than I would like. So like, because I added tassel bits to the back, but there's still a gap in there, like right there. So either I make one more set of tabs or I try to have somebody else lace it and lace it tighter. But like, for the most part, I think it looks pretty good. I feel like we're like 80% of the way there. Like just a couple little tweaks. Yeah. So I was able to do a couple of fit tweaks, but apparently I forgot to film those. So next up, as far as you guys can see, is me putting together my bracers. I literally just took a couple of strips of the silver leather, turned the ends under on the top and the bottom, then turned the ends under on the sides, and I decided that I wanted to add grommets to them and have them lace up. That felt really gladiator-y to me. I know technically Diana's bracelets should be metal because they can, you know, fling bullets and stuff, but whatever, it's magic. Don't worry about it too hard. Next up, it was time for the leg armor. I found a pair of boots that I liked on Amazon. I specifically picked these because they were really solid on the bottom and kind of combat boot looking. And then I tried to kind of rough out what I wanted the shape to be while holding it to my leg. It was a very strange experience, but I was able to clean that up into a shape that worked well enough for what I wanted to do. And I'm cutting just outside of the pattern because I didn't feel like adding seam allowance to this, and I knew I was just going to turn it under in the end, so it wasn't a huge deal. I also cut some out of some heavy interfacing that I had left over from, I believe, when I made Ulala last year, but it's really stiff and strong, and I wanted these to be kind of armory, so I figured that adding some of that would give it that vibe that I wanted. And then I just turned the ends under and sewed everything down. Really simple, really quick and dirty. I just wanted these to kind of look like big, heavy armor pieces. Then I think her boots have leather straps. I didn't have any brown leather, but I did have brown elastics, so we used that for our straps. Next, it was time to try to figure out the headpiece. I decided to use my wig block just to kind of rough out the shapes of what I wanted, because I know that it's my head measurements and it has that nice center marker and stuff. So I pinned some patterning paper to that and just kind of tried to rough out the shape of what I wanted it to look like. And then I took that, cut it apart, and I kind of held it up to my head, made sure that I liked it, and did, a couple of little tweaks, but nothing crazy. And then I also tried to draw out the kind of Art Deco-y wings. I did them as separate pieces because it just felt like it was going to be easier. And then I wasn't initially sure if I wanted them to be on there all the time. I was thinking about maybe like adding magnets to it so I could take them off. And eventually I just decided that was a silly idea. So you'll see eventually I made it into one piece. And then I took the side of my little sketch that I made and cut that in half. I used that to do both sides for this headpiece so it'd be nice and symmetrical. Cleaned it up a little bit. Yes, my French curve is broken. Leave me alone. And then I cut that out of my leather. I ended up having to buy a little bit more of this leather because I didn't have enough to do the headpiece and the corset, which was a little annoying, but it wasn't the end of the world. It wasn't that expensive. And I also cut some of this out of that same heavy interfacing because I wanted these pieces to be really strong. Like they're, in theory, supposed to be kind of metal-like, so I wanted them to be pretty rigid. And then I did the same thing with my wing pieces. Now, I ended up actually cutting out 4 of the wing pieces out of the gold because I knew that if I turned my head in a picture and you could see the white of either the backside of the leather or the interfacing, that it was going to drive me absolutely bonkers. So it was just going to be better for me to make sure that the inside was also gold. From there, I sandwiched my interfacing between the crown pieces and just sewed all along that edge. I was okay with this not being turned under because it's supposed to kind of be a leather piece in my brain, so I was fine with just kind of sewing along it. Pretty simple. Then I used a small, tight zigzag stitch to kind of differentiate the ridges in the wings. I wish this is what I had done on the wings of the cups as well, but what are you going to do? And then to really make sure that the wings were able to stand up and they didn't flop around, I also decided that I was going to add some wire between the layers. So this is, I believe, just some jewelry wire that I had laying around. I took that, roughly gave it the shape of the wing, and hot glued it to one side of the wing just to make sure that it would kind of stay in there. And then I decided that I was going to glue my 2 sides of the wing together. So I put all of my glue on my front side, and then I took my back side, and then I just took a bunch of my quilting clips and clipped that along to let it cure and dry and make sure that they were really together. Then my tiara needed a star. I have these great star gems left over from a Barbie project, but they're pink, so I had to paint one red. I had this fantasy that I was going to dye it, but that did not work, so I just painted it in the end. It wasn't that huge of a deal. And then I just added a little bit of super glue to that and attached that there. Then with how thick the wings were, the edges being white was really bothering me. So I took some time to just go in and use a little bit of gold paint and paint along those sides just so that it wouldn't be a super bright white, noticeable thing. Because that would have absolutely driven me insane in pictures. And I wanted this to, look really nice and polished and finished. So it was a little step, but it was absolutely worth it. Then I just had to add some black elastic to the crown, and then I also glued the wings on at this point and apparently forgot to film that. So just know that that happened. Well, while stuff is curing on the headpiece, let's talk the hair. So in New Frontier, Wonder Woman has very, very kind of standard 1950s long black hair. So about shoulder length, some wave in it. She doesn't have anything crazy. She doesn't have bangs. And any other time in my life, I would have used my own hair for this. I have black hair up until about half a year ago. It was decently long. It used to be quite long, actually. But I got sick of that and I cut all my hair off. And any character that had long black hair, I would generally use my own hair for. Can't do that right now. But I do have exactly one long black wig. So we are going to take that and we're going to transform it into what I want my Diana wig to look like. So I moved and a lot of stuff has been crazy, so you are not allowed to judge me too harshly about the condition that this wig is in, okay? Okay. So this is going to be our Diana wig. It does not look that bad on camera. In person, it's a mess. So I bought this wig when I did my Love Witch inspired Valentine's Day shoot a couple of years back, because that character had like butt long hair and my hair was not that long, and it, you know, needed to be like really teased and all this stuff. And so I bought a wig for that, which means it's quite a bit longer than we need. So we're going to cut some of it off. We're going to do a nice like 50s roller set pattern on it. It is a lace front. I wouldn't super need a lace front for this because the hairline's kind of going to be covered by the headpiece, but like not bad that it's there. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just detangle this. We're going to do that part off camera because it's not super interesting. When I'm going to roll all of the hair up and steam it and all that stuff, we'll come back. But just when you see it, it will have been washed, detangled. I'm going to do that part off screen, and then we will try to get this looking a little bit more like Wonder Woman. So let me just preface this part of the video with saying that while I have done wigs in a semi-professional capacity a couple of times before, I don't have any formal wig training. Everything that I know I've learned from tutorials and YouTube videos. A particular shout out to James Mansfield. I never would have survived without you. Like, I never. But I have been in work situations where I'm the only person who knows anything about wigs, so I know a thing or two. I've had to figure some stuff out just through, like, adversity. So I started, again, detangled the wig off screen, and we're going to take some length off. I am doing kind of my approximation of a vintage haircut that's called a horseshoe cut. It's basically a haircut that kind of is rounded and longer at the back, hence why it's called a horseshoe. I know that it's going to look nice and retro, and then I wanted some face framing pieces in the front. I should have cut those a little longer, not that big of a deal. And then I am using 1-inch spring rollers to roll up most of the hair to get a good like vintage wave. I'm doing an alternating pattern. So you'll notice the first set that I rolled downwards, and then the second set I'm rolling upwards. If you do alternating rows of up, down, when you brush it out, you get a really beautiful kind of like Betty Page wave pretty easily. And then I did 1/2-inch rollers in the front because I wanted them to be a little bit tighter, a little more face framing, and steamed the whole thing. I try to steam every individual roll I usually will count to 10 just to make sure that they all really get enough heat. And then once I have steamed every single one individually, I'll take a grocery bag, a trash bag, whatever, put that over the wig, and then get a little bit more steam in there. That just makes sure that every single curl gets fully saturated and gets all of the heat that it needs. And then I like using like a shopping bag because then I can tie it off at the end and just leave it to let it kind of like stew in its steam. If that makes any sense. That sounds terrible. But that way I can really make sure that everything is really cooking in there while I let it cool and I go do other things. Then once the wig is cooled, I take my hair dryer and I just go in to get all of the curls nice and dry. Sometimes I'll just like leave it overnight to dry, but I don't have that kind of patience, to be honest. And I'll usually do my hot setting first, and then I'll do my cool shot just to help them cool down. And then once they're completely cooled and ready to take out, this is my favorite part, when I just get to like be like, yes, all the curls took. She starts to look a little bit like an antebellum, like Scarlett O'Hara before we brush it out. But trust me, this is the best way to get a really nice vintage wave. And then once all of the curlers are out, we just have to brush through it. And this is where the magic starts to happen, in my opinion. You can already see it's starting to get that beautiful, like 1940s, 1950s, like soft wave. I didn't want to do anything overly styled for Diana because I kind of figured that she wouldn't be somebody who would be like fretting about her hair all the time. But I did still want it to look very like wavy and beautiful. And then I did end up clipping those front pieces because I knew I needed them to be out of my face and out of the way of the tiara. I will say I think that I should have done slightly looser curls on the front because it was tough to blend this, but in the end it ended up looking okay, so I was pretty happy with it. And then with the wig done and the headpiece cured, I put them together and I'm so happy with how they look. Obviously, when I wear it, I will wear the elastic underneath of the wig, but just to look at it, look at how nice. And just like that, the costume is done. So a couple of small details that I apparently forgot to film for one reason or another. My wonderful husband was kind enough to sculpt me an eagle piece because I wasn't 100% sure how to do that. So he made one for me out of Sculpey and painted it. And then Wonder Woman needs her lasso, so I decided to add a little spot on the belt where I could put some gold through there. Then at that point, there was nothing left to do but to go shoot her. So we threw everything in the car and went out to Valley of Fire. And here she is. So there are absolutely one or two things on this costume that I would tweak. I feel like every single thing that I make, I'm always like, oh, next time if I did this, I would do this or I would do that. But overall, guys, look at how cool I look. I felt so powerful in this. I felt so strong in this. And like I said at the end, or at the beginning of this, that's really what I needed from this. I just needed to feel strong and powerful because right now we are living in an age where, especially if you are a marginalized person, if you are a woman, if you are a person of color like I am, they don't want you to feel strong or capable or powerful. And I really needed to just have that reminder to myself that I can be powerful and I can be strong and I can do hard things. And I am so happy with this. I'm so proud of it. Thank you so much for watching this video if you've made it this far through. I'm going to leave all of my socials and my Patreon under this. The finished photo set will be up there as well. And thank you so much for supporting. If you feel like liking, subscribing, any of that stuff, it definitely helps the channel. And in case no one told you today, you are powerful and you are strong and you are wonderful. And I am so happy that we're friends. All right. Until next time, guys.